Okay. Hello, I'm Paul Glumaz, and today is the 17th of October, 2017. And right now, it's the 18th of October in China, and a week-long Party Congress of China, the Communist Party Congress of China, is underway. And these party congresses only happen every 5 years, and it's in this party congress that the decisions are made on the direction of China's future, and also both the economic direction as well as the political direction, and the new network, the new grouping of leaders that will go into the Central Committee, the Politburo, and the leadership ranks, and those who to replace those who will be retired. Now, this meeting is causing a lot of disturbance in the imperial transatlantic system, because China has emerged. Their economy is now bigger than the U.S. actually, in physical terms. And the Belt and Road Initiative has created a situation where China has collaborative ventures going on in 101 countries around the world, centered in large part around the Belt and Road Initiative. Now, you have to understand that this is all being done in a manner that we have not seen since the days of John F. Kennedy, to some degree, and also the days of Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Because what's driving China right now is a vision of a shared future for mankind, a shared destiny, as Xi Jinping puts it, the president of China. So this is absolutely unique, because never before in history has China ever adopted a global identity. It's never happened before. They've always been Chinese, and the rest of the world is the rest of the world. We're Chinese, and the rest of the world is the rest of the world. And we're not responsible for what goes on in the rest of the world. But the Chinese have come to realize, the Chinese leadership, that if they want any kind of future, the whole rest of the world has to improve along with them. That they can't just improve on their own and forget the rest of the world, because they can't do that, because it requires a greater division of labor. It requires an expansion of access to resources, an expansion of development, which requires infrastructure and so on and so forth. From the standpoint of LaRouche's economics, which the Chinese seem to have now understood, you can't just do your own thing. It has to be a global process. And this is a new development for China, to have them to begin to become not just Chinese, but a sense of being responsible global citizens. And this is totally new. But what is happening now is that an entire nation of 1.4 billion people, with all of their extensions into the world, are now going to be governed not by a, quote, dictator, as the media will tell you, but they're going to be governed by a vision of where they want to be. 2020, 2025, 2022, which would be the next 5-year plan. 2050, where they want to be. But not just, the leaders are not just saying, we want to be at such and such a place in 2025 or 2050. The whole society is participating in that process. They may not have a participatory democratic system, but the whole society is participating in this vision. And they want the rest of the world to participate in the vision, because they believe that this vision will lead to prosperity in the world in general, a dramatic upshift in people's lives, and and no longer will you have a world based upon divide and conquer, geopolitics, and all of that other stuff. Well, this is an absolutely terrifying thing, and to the establishment, the transatlantic establishment, whose last great hurrah was Hillary Clinton in the U.S. And this is a huge thing. So now the media, the BBC, the Economist, the Washington Post, and you're going to see a lot more of this. They are going to demonize Xi Jinping as the new emperor, as the most powerful man in the world, as the new Stalin, as the man without a heart who rules with iron fist over the Chinese, who have no liberties at all. Right. That's now going to be, Putin. He's small fish now compared to this guy, and so they're gonna make forget about Putin. It's gonna be Xi Jinping is the bad guy. We gotta get him now, kind of thing. You're gonna see in the media, So it's gonna go a little bit cockeyed soon, but they're desperate because this thing is spreading. This idea of development is spreading. Jerry Brown is saying, "Hey, we're with the One Belt, One Road. California needs to be the gateway to trade in the Orient, to development, and all Washington and Oregon, the same thing, Trump's going to go there in a couple weeks. He's going to show up in China for 2 days. He's going to do a 10-day Asian tour. He's going to start in Korea, then go to Japan. Start in Japan, go to Korea, then China, then Vietnam, and he's going to finish up at the Philippines. He's going to meet our friend Duterte. Duterte is going to say, kill all them drug traffickers. That's the only way to go. So, of course, the liberal media doesn't like that. And, the drug trade. This scandal about Obama helping the drug cartels with this law that got the DEA out of the picture so that pharmaceuticals could self-police. Hey, man, they've really been pumping those opiates. Those are great drugs. The people get hooked on them and they need them, and that's really great for big pharma. So that's and Duterte, he's going to try to tell Trump, you got to kill these bastards. That's the only way to go. So that's not being I'm making fun of it, but that's Duterte is standing up to the drug trade. Will Trump do the same? Will Trump stand up to all of this? This is really going to be a very interesting period because he's going to come back from the 10-day tour, and he's going to know that the United States better work with China. China's prepared to put its $1 trillion U.S. Treasury bonds into a financial facility in the U.S. to be used to fund infrastructure. Okay, to be used as leverage to create infrastructure. You don't have to do a private-public partnership. You don't have to have, let the private sector rape the government pretending that they're building something when they're actually, they're not doing that much. They're charging you an arm and a leg, and then they create the bonds, and then they got to get their 10% off of the bonds. Oh, this is really good milking. Private-public partnerships. Well, Trump has said he doesn't go along with that. He doesn't think it'll work. So we have the 3 hurricanes. We got an infrastructure collapse here. It's also resulted in fires and all kinds of problems because they didn't maintain the forest. They didn't keep they didn't do the required maintenance to reduce fires. You have all these things going on. Everything begs the question, hey, we're going to need all this infrastructure. Where is the money going to come from? It's not going to come from the Federal Reserve because they're all their money goes to buy toxic financial assets to bail out the system. In fact, even Gary Cohn, the the economic advisor, chief economic advisor to Trump, is saying, we had these what do they call them for derivatives? Clearinghouses for derivatives set up so that we could buy insurance for the derivatives. All of the registered derivative, the banks could register their derivative transactions at the clearinghouse. If one of them went sour, the clearinghouse would pick up the tab. But everybody's got an ante in, that kind of thing. Well, this was supposed to keep the system from going through another 2008. But now Gary Cohn's saying that all this has done is made the risk worse. Has actually put the risk much greater. Has made it more focused. So we have a financial crisis in the making here. And then the whole thing around the Brexit and who has jurisdiction over these clearinghouses and everything. And it's concentrated the risk. So now instead of, it's much bigger than Lehman Brothers. So we're looking at Lehman Brothers squared or cubed coming up. So in the middle of all this, you have Saudi Arabia getting antsy and going to Russia and talking about denominating some of their oil exports to China and yuan. Maybe the dollar is not the best thing. Maybe we ought to diversify in other currencies or currency swaps or things like that. So there's a lot of shakiness going on in the financial system. And so when Trump said recently at a meeting on the healthcare thing, he said, "Look, this whole Obamacare was nothing but a massive insurance ripoff of the citizenry. Why should they get all the money from the federal government, and when the poor people are being denied, care, or they're getting bad care?" So that's one thing he said. And he said the thing about the Puerto Rican debt will have to be canceled. And then then this guy Gary Cohn says, well, there's a real crisis with derivatives coming. So what is Trump's plan to deal with all this when the shit hits the fan? Okay, or excuse me, I shouldn't use that word. When the fan hits, gets hit. Let's put it that way. So anyhow, what's Trump going to do? And now he's going to China. And the Chinese know what the situation is. They don't want the whole thing to collapse collapse everything. So maybe the Chinese and Trump will get together and talk about how they're going to resolve the situation, so that the United States can come out of this with a different perspective, with a future. What does Xi Jinping says? A shared destiny, a community of shared destiny. In other words, don't leave the United States out. Bring the United States in. We got a lot of potential that's been destroyed, but we still have a lot of potential. We could come back. So okay, so now I'm going to go into something that is very much disliked by the economists, the financiers, all these people who supposedly know economics and play with derivatives and everything. Is the revolutionary concept of Alexander Hamilton. And I'll quickly give you a sense of that. Alexander Hamilton and his few closest associates, like Gouverneur Morris and John Jay, they actually were the ones who forced the convention, Constitutional Convention, and eventually played a key role in establishing the Constitution and getting the Constitution ratified. But the key to why they wanted to do this was that Hamilton believed that only through a republic with free citizens could you, with the proper credit facilities, the national bank, and converting all of the Revolutionary War debt into funded debt that could be used as circulating capital. Only in that way could you have the means to develop the nation. And his concept of development was the most revolutionary concept of all time, which is the concept of the development of manufacturers. Because throughout history, it's and his idea of the development of manufacturers is that the development of manufacturers applied to agriculture will free up people from agriculture, increase the yields, increase the productivity of agriculture per person per acre, such that people would be free to do other things, including more manufacturers. But the idea was, historically, that you have a farmer and you have a farming unit, and they would have to produce enough to feed themselves at least. And then you would have a competition for the product of the land. But there was a limitation to how much could be produced on land. There was limitations of water, limitations of technology, limitations of whatever. But up until the Industrial Revolution, the limitation could not exceed the physical power of human physical labor and animal labor. That was your limitation. All of history is determined by access to the product of the farmer. If the farmer was brutally exploited, then the farmers died, then the production would die. If you didn't have enough to cover, you could raid your neighbors. If you were a peasant, and in that situation, what would freedom be? Well, the freedom of a very few landed aristocrats or landlords could live a leisurely life off the proceeds of the toilers. That was one form of freedom. The other form of freedom was for a peasant to escape and join a outlaw group and become a highwayman or an outlaw, or become or join a mercenary army, which is kind of freedom in a way, but not really. So what do the founding fathers mean by freedom? They meant industrial technological development, the development of manufacturers to free up the labor and free up the land to make it more productive so that people could have freedom to pursue and develop themselves and have more advanced science and more advanced education and more advanced medicine and so forth. That's the concept of freedom. Now, unfortunately, Hamilton had to fight Jefferson and Madison, who did not want this freedom. They wanted to expand the system of slavery, slave plantations. They wanted to expand it to the north if they could. They wanted to expand it to the east, to the west. And from 1800 to 1860, only one president did not represent the slave power that grew. And this led to the Civil War. It was only during the Civil War that Lincoln was fully able to adopt Hamilton's policies and completely industrialize the United States, including agriculture. That mass agricultural expansion is what won the war, partly won the war. The same thing, but then again, 30 years later, you're back to the same thing. Jim Crow, the Ku Klux Klan, then the second Ku Klux Klan under Woodrow Wilson. And they don't talk about Woodrow Wilson giving birth to the second Ku Klux Klan with the Birth of a Nation movie, but then that's Hollywood. Hollywood comes out of the Ku Klux Klan. So what do you have? So it wasn't until FDR during the period after the collapse that you have this massive application of Hamilton's policies, the development of manufacturers. And now we've lost all of that. We have to go back to it. But that's the core principle of Hamilton. It's a revolutionary principle. And the reason the oligarchy wants a population between 500 to 2 billion people is because that somewhere in there is the maximum pre-industrial population you can have, which is what they mean by sustainable agriculture. What they mean by sustainable agriculture is, and now all of that's being upset by China. China's doing. And you can't stop progress once the development of manufacturers is unleashed, and then you have more and you have more efficiency, and it keeps going. It doesn't stop, and they're trying to stop it. The environmentalists are insane. They want to stop progress. They want to go back to 1 billion people, 2 billion people, 500 million people. That's the insanity you're dealing with. And then all these anti-government people, well, government's bad, We need to get them off our back. They're getting in our way. They don't want to. You don't want to build this thing here because we got a right. We got a right to have our own thing. Well, yeah, you got a right to have your own thing too. But if the government isn't participating in the vision of the nation, if the nation has no vision and you don't have a government committed to representing that vision, you don't have nothing. We used to have that to some degree, but now China has that. And we need to get it too. And that's the revolutionary aspect of Alexander Hamilton, which you're not going to get in the books and you're not going to find out unless you read Hamilton directly, provided you have the level of English language that Hamilton had at his day, which we don't have today in a lot of our people. This is also the core of Lyndon LaRouche. Only LaRouche has put this in a scientific way, in a scientific footing. So it's much more accessible, much more direct, and you can predict what the outcome will be in terms of your investment in key scientific areas and key infrastructure. And the Chinese have put this thing together on a global scale. And we have to be a part of it because that is the vision of a shared destiny for mankind, and that's what we need. We used to have that with FDR and Kennedy. Now, it's a Chinese vision, but it's our vision too, and it's also the vision of the original Renaissance, where, and it's also the vision of Hamilton, to develop, to bring people out of the condition of scarcity, to bring people out of the condition of manual labor and agriculture, bring people out of poverty, and make their life more powerful, more useful, more developed, more varied. And of course, every time you develop, you go from one platform of development to another. You have to massively expand the division of labor because you have many more components, many more parts. And this is the essence of LaRouche's economics. And whether or not you go from one platform to another is very important. Because if you stay in one platform, economic platform, and you don't go to the next platform, you don't figure out how to go to the next platform, then you'll be corrupted. Why will you be corrupted? Because you're not expanding the surplus. So now you have a limited resources, and now everybody's fighting over limited resources. So you have to go to the next platform, and whatever surplus there is, it's not a question to be divided between the rich and the poor. It's a question of using the surplus to further develop, so that everyone develops beyond further, as opposed to this is mine and this is mine, and I'm a rich person and you poor person don't deserve anything because you're a piece of what, and you're not willing to work for it. Therefore I deserve it and you don't. And the poor person says, "What do you mean you deserve it, you jerk? You created the policies that created the mess that I'm in now. Or what do you need? Why do you tell me you deserve it more?" Here you have Rush Limbaugh going with about the terrorism of welfare mothers in their Cadillacs. You have all this kind of crap going on, and where you get the rich person saying, "Well, I deserve it more than the poor person because I was able to grab it." All's fair, in war and peace, in love, and I'm able to grab whatever I can grab, and therefore you didn't grab it, therefore you're stupid, and therefore you don't deserve it. But that's the mentality that you don't have when you have a vision. When you have a vision, you don't have that mentality. Everyone has a sense of a future. We're going to be on the moon and within 10 years. We're going to be colonizing space within 50 years. We're going to be greening the deserts in 30 years. We're going to have high-speed rail everywhere, so you can go anywhere you want. That's freedom. That's real freedom. Not laboring in a field all your life when you don't know anything because you're not exposed to anything. You're not even getting an education, and that's considered freedom? No, that's not freedom. or being so dumbed down in the schools and having no future, you take drugs. That's not freedom. Freedom to take drugs, that's not freedom. We need a vision, and that vision is coming by way of the Belt and Road Initiative. So tonight I went all over the place with you, but we're entering a period, an incredible period, and I'm expecting big developments coming out of Russia, coming out of China, and most of all coming out of the 10-day trip that Trump begins in 2 weeks.